go to college football from this weekend. A must-win game for both teams. Alabama completely steamrolled LSU, 42-13 on Saturday. Jalen Milroe had his way, running for a career-high 185 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. Meanwhile, Georgia lost their second game of the season when they were upset by Ole Miss, 28-10. Now we say hello to the king of the SEC. His name is Paul Finebaum.
What's going on, Paul?
What's going on? A lot of things.
How is everybody?
Oh, we're good. We're good. We're
Great
all
to
straight.
see you guys.
Good.
Question for you. More surprising this weekend, Bama's win or Georgia's loss?
I was more surprised by Georgia's loss, and especially the way it happened, Shae. Alabama makes a living out of winning games at night in Tiger Stadium. They've only lost one 2 years ago in about 20 years. So it just seemed to me that Georgia would play better. I mean, they were a slight favorite in that game. I just did not expect Georgia to completely be eviscerated across both lines of scrimmage. And Carson Beck had quarterback interception issues going into the game, and he was literally rolled over. It was a shock to me.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Paul, you said you surprised by Georgia. They won 2 games in which he threw back-to-back games and he had 3 interceptions. I'm surprised. Not only am I surprised that Alabama won, it's the fashion in which they won. 311 rush yards when you know they're not going to throw the football. And as you mentioned, you're in Death Valley. And whoever loses this game, your college football playoffs hopes are over. They're done. And the way Alabama went down there and ran the football, and you know they're going to run the football because it was a deluge, a torrential downpour until late in the ball game. And you allowed a quarterback to run 12 times for $185 and 4 touchdowns. I was surprised with the relative ease in which Alabama won that game in Death Valley. Georgia has been skating on thin ice. We saw them fall behind by 20-plus points against Alabama. They should have lost to Kentucky had Kentucky gone for it. Florida had them on the ropes. The best Georgia have looked all year is when they went to Austin and they thumped Texas. But if you look at the totality of the Georgia Bulldogs, they've been playing with borrowed time, and it finally caught up with them. Ole Miss is a good football team, and as you said, Paul, they got after them on both sides of the football.
Ole Miss is a good football team. Georgia is not as good as we've grown accustomed to seeing them look over the last 3 years. So I wasn't that surprised. I was a little surprised. I wasn't that surprised. What I saw happen to the LSU Tigers in Death Valley was an atrocity. Let me tell y'all something right now. Jalen Milroe, 185 yards running, 4 touchdowns, running roughshod all over them, Paul. You know what I did, Paul? I actually reached out to my man, RC. I left my man Swagoo alone, obviously, because, I knew that he was a bit depressed and I didn't want to mess with him. I messed with him enough about the Cowboys. He doesn't deserve this. The Cowboys and LSU, that's a lot. I mean, I love my man Swagoo, so I didn't want to do that to him. Brian Clark, I reached out to him to give him love for his son, Jordan. You know what I'm saying? Showing up for Notre Dame, getting an interception the whole bit. I was like, way to go, because I didn't want to depress him with what was happening to LSU. It was pretty damn bad, okay? And just for everybody to understand this, listen, I like Brian Kelly personally. I like him, but the man is 34-34 against top 25 opponents in his career. There's a lot of big games he doesn't win, all right? This year, he's 1-3 with their only winner versus Ole Miss in overtime. They've lost to USC. They lost to Texas A&M, and they got obliterated by Alabama. Now, the one person that I did feel sorry for, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong. Listen, who's this kid? Blake Baker, the LSU defensive coordinator. Is that him, Paul? Is that him? I want to make sure.
Yeah, this is his first year.
Let me tell you something. I got to admit, man, I looked at Brian Kelly on the sideline. I thought Baker was going to leave the stadium unemployed. I ain't gonna lie to you. I mean, when Jalen Milroe ran for that 4th touchdown, and I saw, Brian Kelly walk over to him I thought the brother might get fired on the sideline, Shannon. I didn't think he was gonna make it to the locker room with a job.
I know the exact moment.
It was like, yo. And you know what? And I didn't blame Kelly because Milroe ran all over them last year, and to let it happen again. Well, I mean, that's pretty damn bad, y'all. It's really bad, but listen, LSU, look, it was more surprising because they got their ass kicked. I mean, that was pretty bad. to get you get beat like that by Alabama, the game you're looking forward to most in the season, on your home turf to get obliterated like that. I'm sorry, Paul. I think that's the surprise. That's the biggest surprise.
Paul, let's be clear.
Yeah,
okay,
so,
I think go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
I just want to say one thing. Stephen A. Shae and Shannon texted me during the game. He said, Kelly's got to fire this guy, the defensive coordinator. I said, Stephen A., he just fired a guy at the end of last season. This guy's got to at least complete the 12-game season. So, I mean, it was that bad, though. And you know, Kelly should have thrown him under the bus and should have left him on the bus.
I didn't say he should be. I didn't text you and say he should be fired. I said, yo, man, I think Kelly might fire him tonight. I said he might fire him.
On this play.
That's what I was saying.
Right here.
I didn't say it should have, but I was like, this is really bad. He might get fired tonight.
The outcomes of these games, I don't think we're surprised.
Well, we know, hey, guys, we know one thing for certain. Brian Kelly doesn't have any problem throwing anybody under the bus except himself. He will blame them players. He'll blame everybody else except Brian Kelly. That is his history.
Okay.
How about not having your team ready to play? Whose fault is that? That wasn't Brian Kelly because your offense wasn't much better.
Yep, I agree with Shannon. The outcomes to these games, I don't think were the most surprising. I think we all saw this coming. When Carson Beck was pressured against Florida, his QBR was 0. And we all mentioned it now. Brian Kelly just simply cannot win a game in bright lights. It doesn't matter if he's at Notre Dame, if he's at LSU. It just can't happen, Paul. That's just the reality of the situation. Let's move on to Colorado, though, because they keep on rolling. The Buffaloes were able to overcome an early deficit to come away with a 41-27 victory over Texas Tech this weekend. Shedeur Sanders continues to play at a high level. The dude threw 3 touchdowns, ran for another. Colorado now has won 3 straight and are on pace to play in the Big 12 championship. Let's also note, Colorado has a 27% chance to make the college football playoff and a 32% chance to win the Big 12 with 3 games remaining in the regular season.
Stephen A., can you imagine a man that went 4-6 and somehow gets his team to the Big 12, win the Big 12, go to the college football playoff? Oh, they leaving. Because what else can they say? They couldn't say anything about him when he actually played because he was historically an all-time great. Now we got to take it out on his kids, 17, 18, 19-year-olds. Got to get the vitriol because it's leveled at him, even though he's not playing. Yes, what they did, and look, they come home, they play a very tough Utah team that won a game against, I think they beat BYU last week, but they're not the Utah that we're used to seeing. Man, he has this team playing very, very well. Webster, they're more than Travis Hunter at the skill position. Webster can catch it. They got a number 14. I forget, I can't call his name off the top of my head. The offense and the defense. Warren Sapp, the D coordinator, the defense, he has those guys coming, Stephen A. and Paul. I like what I'm seeing. Shedeur. Yes, they're going to the college football playoffs.
Yes, I believe they are as well. And let me say this, Paul. I'm going to say this right here on national television, okay? This team lost 6 straight last year, 7 of their last 8 games, finished the season 4-8, and were projected coming into this season to finish 11th in their conference, okay? To me, primetime Deion Sanders is the coach of the year. I'm thinking about Travis Hunter as a leading candidate for the Heisman. And I'm going to take it a step further. Are you ready for this, Paul? I'm going to make people very, very uncomfortable here. Primetime has shown we know the brother can recruit. We know what he is. You talk about the greatest cornerback in the history of the National Football League, okay? This brother, primetime Deion Sanders, and the job that he's doing. Are you ready for where I'm going,
All right, let's go.
Are you ready for where I'm going, Shannon? Ready for where I'm going, Paul?
Where you going to put him at? Where you putting him at?
I believe that the Dallas Cowboys should tank the rest of the season, get the #1 overall pick, so you can draft Shedeur Sanders, and by the way, hire primetime Deion Sanders as your head coach for the Dallas Cowboys. I think that should be Jerry Jones's master plan. That's right, I said it. Hire primetime Deion Sanders. You got to tank the season to make sure you can get his son as your quarterback, okay? And you move forward that way. That is what I believe the Dallas Cowboys should do, because as much as I appreciate the job and appreciate the University of Colorado and the citizens of Boulder, Colorado, giving primetime Deion Sanders this opportunity, the bottom line is when you think about primetime, we shouldn't be thinking about Boulder, Colorado. We should be thinking about someplace else. And I think Big D, Dallas.
But then you're going to be forced to like the Cowboys.
It's all right. For him, I could do that. I could stomach that. I could do that. I could root for them a little bit better.
Paul,
Stephen A., I completely agree. I think they will make the playoffs. I didn't think so a week or two ago. I didn't think they would have a winning season 2 months ago. But what you said about the Cowboys is dead on. I think Deion now knows college football is too difficult. Dealing with the portal, dealing with the NIL, dealing with the bureaucracy of administrators, I don't think long-term will suit him. He's beaten the system. If the season ended today, it was a masterpiece. But I think he can do so much more, especially with someone like Jerry Jones. You can attack Jerry Jones all day long, and it's easy to do.
Deion won't.
But there is a relationship there, and I think it would work. It would be the biggest story in sports, and I think Deion would be very smart to take that phone call.
It would be a business move, Shannon, if you remember when me and Mr. KD got into it a couple of weeks ago. Remember how I pointed out, had the brother decided to go to the New York Knicks instead of the Nets, what a big time business move that would have been. The man is worth close to $1 billion now. He'd be comparable to LeBron numbers in terms of finance if he had been in the New York Knicks uniform because of the marketability that we had. Could you imagine the business move it would be for Jerry Jones if he brought Prime Time in as his head coach? Lord have mercy.
How much?